If you're in a fantasy football league and want to know the best players you need to be adding on the waiver wire this week, you're in the right place. Because in this video, we're breaking down the 10 players that you must add if you want to improve your fantasy team across all the positions and ultimately win your league. And let's start with a very sad situation that happened to the New York Giants this weekend against their division rivals, the Philadelphia Eagles. It has to do with their sensational, very fun running back, Cam Skattebo. He's been great in real life, great in fantasy. He unfortunately suffered a right ankle dislocation, possibly likely a fracture is what Jesse Morris said on Twitter. We have to get more reports on this, but it seems like his season is going to be over, and he says it's similar to Chris Godwin in 2024. Now, Chris Godwin in 2024, he was an older player, wide receiver, but he's still dealing with some complications from that injury. Now, he had fibula issues as well, and some other things went on, so that's a totally different situation when you factor all that in. But really, what you need to know from this is that Cam Skattebo's season is over, and we still have a half a fantasy season, the playoffs, all that to go, fantasy championships, hopefully you get there, so what do we do? Well, now the backfield is going to come down to likely these two guys, Tyron Tracy, a second-year player who was a nice fifth-round pick for them, flashed as a rookie last year, and a reliable veteran in Devin Singletary, who head coach Brian Daboll also coached at Buffalo and has a soft spot for and continues to keep him in this offense, even if he's not been all that efficient, but he's a trustworthy back. So what do we get? Well, we did get somewhat of a sample in Week 8 when Cam Skattebo went down, at least in that game, what this backfield would look like. What we got was Tyron Tracy leading the way. He ended with 10 carries for 39 yards, nothing crazy there, but Devin Singletary only got 2 carries, which is interesting, for 0 yards. Now, some of this makes sense. To start the season, Tyron Tracy was the starter. He took the job from Devin Singletary last season when Singletary got hurt, didn't look back, and Tracy was the starter ahead of Skattebo this year until Tracy got hurt himself. Now, overall, what this ended up leading to right here, as you can see, a great tweet from Dwayne McFarland. Be sure to follow him on Twitter. Cam Skattebo was injured after 1 snap on the 3rd drive in Week 8. Tyron Tracy was the clear-cut RB1 after that play, playing 64% of the snaps. That was about 28 of 36 snaps, 56% of the rush attempts. This includes Jackson Dart seeing a lot of the carries. When you look at just the backfield opportunities, Tyron Tracy actually saw 13 out of 16 backfield opportunities, meaning what other running backs were involved. Singletary, only 3 opportunities, 13 for Tyron Tracy. He also saw 55% of the routes, which is what we want to see. He's a former wide receiver from college, so it's good to see that he's getting that passing game usage, and a very solid 16% of the targets, which is maybe not always a given when you have a mobile quarterback like Jackson Dart. Devin Singletary only played 19% of the snaps, only saw 13% of the carries. This is what we want to see. We want to see a potential workhorse running back, or at least a guy who could see 15 plus opportunities in an offense that's moving the ball and have passing game usage. Now, this shouldn't be too shocking, right? Because again, Singletary was the RB1 to start this season, and last year, if you look at this, over his final 13 games when he took over the backfield in Week 5, was averaging 13.5 fantasy points per game, basically a top 20 running back, between his receiving and rushing yards in a bad offense of the Giants last year, over 80 total yards per game in one of the worst offensive lines in the league. The situation, at least with Jackson Dart so far this year, has been a little bit better. So when it comes down to it, Tyron Tracy is somebody who I would consider the biggest waiver wire add. Again, this is a guy who in college, right? He ends up transferring in college. He goes from Iowa to Purdue. At Iowa, he was basically just a pass catcher, right? 14 catches, 15 catches. Then he starts to transition into being a running back, and that's where he goes from seeing just 2 rush attempts, 7, to 113 in his final year, led the Big Ten with 6.3 yards per carry. So he has this very strong dual threat, like a true versatile skill set, as he used to be a wide receiver, then a running back, then a wide receiver, then a running back again, right? He kind of has this hybrid role. We've seen it in the NFL work out. Now he's going to get the opportunity to go back into some sort of workhorse usage, at least get a dozen plus touches a week. He's a priority add. The next situation we have to consider and talk about is another running back that is dealing with injury. This one is Quinshon Judkins. We go to Jesse Morris again. He said it's a right shoulder injury, likely on the play. He shows the play right here. If you want to watch it, we can watch it together. There you go. He had somebody fall on that shoulder. Usually when that happens, there's a risk of either a break or an AC joint sprain. He says unclear in the severity. As of this recording, we still don't have the severity. It's just been diagnosed as an AC joint, but due to the score, it didn't make sense for him to go back in. It's likely a type 1, and the good news is that the Browns are on bye next week. Good chance he'll be back in Week 10. So here's the thing. An AC joint sprain, likely it's going to heal within like 2 to 4 weeks. Depends on the severity, of course. If you have to play through it, if it is going to take a little bit of time and he comes back after the bye, it's going to be a pain tolerance thing. We actually saw Jordan Mason have an AC joint sprain last year on Thursday Night Football. He tried to play through it. He came back the next game. He tried to play through it, and it's just something that really can frustrate you, cause a lot of pain, and potentially get re-injured. So with that in mind, we know this is not some sort of season ender for Quinshon Judkins, so we're not trying to unload our entire fab on these backup running backs, Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford. But luckily with this situation, we know that Quinshon Judkins, due to his contract, due to his off-the-field issues, was not playing to start the season. So we got to see the rookie Dylan Sampson and the veteran Jerome Ford kind of split this backfield to start the year, and we got some information from that. Now, this past week, Quinshon Judkins left the game, and the rest of the running backs, not a lot of time left in that game, didn't do much here. Dylan Sampson was the only other RB to see a carry. He saw 3 for 0 yards. That's not all that great. But in terms of the usage, usage, it was clear-cut Dylan Sampson as the workhorse once Junkins left the game. Sampson got all 3 backfield carries and 6 targets, a very insane 30% target share. Dylan Gabriel was not forcing the ball downfield much. Jerome Ford had just 1 target on a 1st and 10. If you scroll through to, once again, Dwayne McFarland, very nice stats here. He says Dylan Sampson was the RB1 once Quinshon Judkins left, played 73% of the rest of the snaps in that game, had 75% of the rush attempts, and an insane 30+% of the targets. Again, this is a small sample of like a quarter to a quarter and a half. The Browns are going on bye, so maybe it doesn't matter at all, but I wouldn't be surprised if Quinshon Judkins comes out of the bye week and he's seeing limited, maybe even not even practicing on that Wednesday or Thursday heading into week 10. That's why you should try and stash these guys now, especially because we're not going to have 6 teams on bye again. You can try and keep an extra guy or 2 on your roster. More so on your bench, not your roster, right? In case you don't really need them to fill in a bunch of flex spots because the guy's on buys. Now, in week 1, we got to see when Judkins was not playing. We got to see Sampson, the rookie, lead the backfield with 12 carries for 29 yards ahead of the veteran Ford. More importantly, he's the better pass catching running back, the guy that they've been putting out there more. 8 catches in week 1, meaning as a 4th round rookie, this dude saw 20 touches in week 1 for 64 yards. He was a hot waiver wire add that week because of Quinshon's status being up in the air, but this is a guy who just had 6 targets this past week on a 30% target share. If he was to be a spot start in week 10 for you, maybe week 11, if it extended for some reason to week 11 and Judkins' shoulder was messed up, then you start to get some serious like top of the top running backs going on by that week. He could be a fill-in for you. As a reminder, this is a talented running back. In college last year, averaged 5.8 yards per carry, almost 1,500 rushing yards he had last year at Tennessee. He also was able to catch some passes, as you're seeing now in the NFL. He's a good pass catcher. 20 catches for 143 yards, almost 1,700 total yards last year in college. If I had to choose one of these guys, it would easily be Dylan Sampson. If you're in deeper leagues, you could stash Jerome Ford for now, but since Judkins doesn't seem like he's going to miss probably just more than 1 game when you factor in the bye week, if he was to even miss a game, I'm only really looking at Dylan Sampson here. All right, so there's some running back injury type situations. Now let's move to the wide receiver position on a guy who has been trending up and honestly scoring a lot of touchdowns the past few weeks. This man's name is Troy Franklin of the Denver Broncos. We've talked about him before because he's had a couple of these big games so far this year. I mean, look at this right here. Back in week 7, he could have had a very big game. Oh, there you go. You can see here he only catches 3 balls for 19 yards. He does find the end zone on a deflected pass, but he saw very quietly a team high 10 targets in that game in week 7. Only turned them into 3 catches for 19 yards. Courtland Sutton, as always, had a good game, 87 yards. He had 10 targets. Marvin Mims was the one who kind of stole that spotlight behind Sutton. 6 catches, 85 yards in a game where the Denver Broncos offense didn't come alive until the 4th quarter and they scored those 33 points or whatever it was in the 4th quarter. You got that touchdown on deflection from Troy Franklin, but the usage was the thing that was very encouraging. In fact, according to Fantasy Points Data, a great account on Twitter if you like fantasy and just data and all that, right? I mean, that's kind of in their name exactly, Fantasy Points Data. Expected fantasy points in week 7 and the full season. Troy Franklin had 26.6 expected fantasy points. Let's remember, he caught 3 balls for about 20 yards and a touchdown, so in your PPR formats, he only got 11 points, but he was expected to score 26 points, but most of his actual production came on a deflected touchdown. What that expected fantasy points means is based on his usage, his 10 targets, where they were on the field, how he was seeing those targets, the catchable ball rate, he should have had 15 more fantasy points. So that stinks if you started him in week 7, but if you started him with 6 teams on bye, the bye Mageddon in week 8, he paid off for you because he got all those points back. 6 catches, 89 yards, led the team in catches, led the team in receiving yards, led the team in targets with 8 for the 2nd straight week. He has 18 targets the last 2 weeks, leads the team, and oh yeah, he had 2 touchdowns this past week. It was a phenomenal game on a week where there wasn't a ton of wide receiver standout performances. Obviously, at the running back position, Chase Brown blows up, RJ Harvey scores 3 times, Jonathan Taylor continues to be absolutely dominant. Another good game from Devon Achane. Finally, Saquon Barkley gets going. In terms of the wide receivers, it was like Jamar Chase had a big game. Troy Franklin, I'm sure I'm missing one, but Troy Franklin was the one who was standing out for nearly 100 yards and multiple scores. And it seems like his connection, this is a 2nd-year wide receiver. They drafted him last year. He wasn't all that used until maybe a little bit here and there later in the season, but his connection with Bo Nix, a reminder, these guys went to college together. It's starting to flourish. And they didn't just go to college together. Troy Franklin, the final year with him and Bo Nix in 2023 when they both left for the NFL, he dominated. 1,383 yards, over 17 yards per catch. He was an absolute beast in this offense, earning 115 targets from Bo Nix, and an offense that at Oregon, sure, there's a lot of checkdowns, quick passes, but Troy Franklin was the one seeing the downfield usage, and now he's seeing it again with his same college quarterback, Bo Nix, who loves throwing him the ball. He's targeted him literally 18 times, a team high the past 2 weeks. That means something. And you can see that right here. According to Yahoo Fantasy Sports on Twitter, Troy Franklin has gotten more usage and outproduced Courtland Sutton over the last 2 weeks. If we scroll down, the last 2 weeks, more targets like we said, 3 touchdowns compared to 0. Fantasy points, 35.3 for Troy Franklin, 22 for Courtland Sutton. Now, of course, this is just a 2-game sample. If you look at the entire year, if you date it back to last year when Troy Franklin Franklin was a rookie. Courtland Sutton has been fantastic. I'm still taking Courtland Sutton rest of season, but Troy Franklin, he's no longer like, oh, maybe he's a top 100 player rest of season. No, he's quickly rising up the rankings, yet he's still available on over 50 to nearly 60+% of waiver wires. So while you still can add Troy Franklin, because sure, Pat Bryant in a game that was a blowout, he got his first receiving touchdown this year, but he hasn't been all that used. And in terms of Marvin Mims, like, he had that big game where everybody was getting production in week 7 as they played from behind. For the most part, though, his usage, his snaps have been down this year and this past week. It's Troy Franklin, it's Courtland Sutton, it's some underneath passes to the running backs, and then the running game in general, maybe Evan Ingram for 3 to 5 catches here or there, but it's those 2 wide receivers for Bo Nix, and Troy Franklin is the one that's hot right now and heating up and rising up the rankings. Now, before we get into the next player in this video, I've got something great to share with you. I've teamed up with DraftKings Pick 6, the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, where your game day instincts can turn into real payouts fast. Okay, so here's exactly how you could take advantage. Just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats, from breakout rookies to elite quarterbacks, and watch every snap get way more interesting. Now, the better your calls, the bigger the payouts. There's no gimmicks, no confusing rules, just you making your reads, and if they hit, well, you could start to stack up some wins real fast. And here's the best part. Right now, new DraftKings Pick 6 customers can get $50 in bonus picks when you play just $5 on your first pick set. So all you have to do now is download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code SAL to get in on the action today. In partnership with DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. All right, now let's get back to these running backs and the guys dealing with injuries, because Saquon Barkley, although he broke out this past week, 60-yard touchdown in his first touch, multiple touchdowns and 100 yards finally, he had a groin issue and did not come back into the game, but they were calling it, according to John Clark, an Eagles beat reporter, they called it a precaution. They were leading over the Giants, who at that point didn't have Malik Neighbors, obviously. They didn't have Cam Scatterbo. They were down multiple scores in this game, and it was pretty easy, I would say, that it was clear to see that the Eagles were going to win, so they said, Saquon, don't go back out there. The Eagles also get to go on their bye week in week 9, so this is another situation like Quinshon Judkins, where, okay, maybe by the time Saquon comes back, this should be fine, assuming it's not some sort of major groin strain that would keep him out for like 3 to 4+ weeks. We don't have all the information on it yet. We probably won't get it all that much until week 10, or week 10 is coming with the practice report. So in the meantime, maybe we just consider stashing some players, especially if you're in a competitive 10-man or probably all 12-team leagues at this point. And let's see, okay, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Will Shipley, or the guy they traded multiple draft picks for, and Tank Bigsby, and used as a punt returner until recently? Who got more usage? Oh, pretty easily Tank Bigsby. He turned 9 carries into 104 yards in a game where the Giants offense was easily able to run on, or the Eagles offense was easily able to run on the Giants, compared to Will Shipley, just 3 carries for 2 yards. Now, what did the usage look like in this game? Well, as we can just point to Dwayne McFarland's helpful tweets again, he said Saquon Barkley had an injury that originally was called a hamstring, then it was called a groin injury on the 7th drive in week 8 from that small 2-drive sample, so it was only 2 drives. The rest of the way, Tank Bigsby was leading it pretty easily. He played 80% of the snaps, got 80% of the rush attempts, 50% of the routes run, compared to Will Shipley, who just got 20% of the snaps, 20% of the rush attempts, and he looked very good out there. I mean, we could show you this run as well. I don't want to get demonetized on it, so we'll just show you kind of a little highlight here. You see the handoff, and look how many tackles this guy breaks. Ready? We'll play it for a couple seconds for you. He's breaking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, there's a huge thing, and he just keeps running through it here. He runs through it for another 15, 20 yards. Tank Bigsby was a very good runner at Jacksonville when he was healthy, when he had time to run. And that was behind a bad offensive line on a bad offense, like a terrible offensive line last year. Now, since the team liked Baishal Tootin, a rookie they drafted this year, they like LaQuinn Allen as well, another rookie on passing downs. They ended up trading away Tank Bigsby because they also had Travis Etienne. They just didn't want to have 4 running backs active every single week. But if you recall last year, Tank Bigsby, from week 7 through 8, when Travis Etienne was dealing with injuries and was not out there, he was a workhorse running back, Bigsby. He averaged 22 carries per game, 98 yards per game, and over 17 fantasy points per game. Again, behind a much worse offensive line. I know the Eagles offensive line is banged up, not playing as well this year. Still way better than the Jaguars offensive line was last year. Still a way better offensive environment. So if Saquon Barkley heading into week 10 was to be limited in practice or not missing practice and maybe even miss a game, Tank Bigsby becomes a must start. Back to the wide receiver position we go with a 4th round rookie out of Tennessee, Chimere Deke. And this is a guy who, look, Alec Imanor has been in these videos a couple times this year, an outside boundary jump ball kind of receiver for the Tennessee Titans. He's also a rookie. He was actually drafted after Chimere Deke right here. Chimere Deke this past week once again had a good game. If you look at week 7 first, let's go there. 4 catches, 70 yards and a touchdown. He led the team with 70 yards in that game. Okay, let's look this week in week 8 now, once again with no Calvin Ridley. And also, there is no Tyler Lockett in this game, which matters because Lockett was running some routes. He was earning some targets, but he asked for his release and he was released. And in week 8, an even bigger game for Chimere Deke, led the team with 7 catches, catches, 93 yards, was easily Cam Ward's favorite target on a team-high 8 targets in this game, and the underlying usage, as you could probably expect based on his production, was good. Because in this game for Tennessee, although the other rookie, Alec Imanor, still led the way, running 91% of the routes, Jahmyr Deek, season high, 91% of the routes, saw a 23% target share, which was a tied for the team high. Now, here's the deal. We have to still hope that Calvin Ridley misses time. Obviously, you're not going to be getting Tyler Lockett coming back. Other guys on this offense like Van Jefferson aren't really doing much, and James Proche is mostly a special teams wide receiver. So at the end of the day, it's a terrible offense, but they're going to be trailing a lot, so it can lead to these opportunities for Jahmyr Deek, who caught 7 of 8 passes this past week. His final year in college, 783 yards, a 19% target share. Nothing crazy, nothing wild. He was kind of a surprise pick out of Florida in terms of where he went in the 4th round ahead of some other wide receivers. But as of right now, these last 2 weeks, he's looking really good. And assuming Calvin Ridley, who's dealing with a hamstring injury as an older receiver, right? He's missed the last 2 weeks, hasn't practiced at all. Assuming he misses another week or two, it should just be Alec Imanor and Jahmyr Deek once again going out there leading the way at wide receiver. And even if and when, I mean, I'm sure he's going to, but when Ridley returns, I should say, we don't even know what the wide receiver room is going to look like. If these rookies are starting to play well, maybe it's those guys getting more opportunity since they're going to be the future with Cam Ward, you would think, at least the next year or two after this, compared to Calvin Ridley. Let's actually stick in Tennessee here and look at the running back position just to kind of do a check-in on this Tennessee backfield, right? Tyjae Spears came back from his injury a couple of weeks ago, and he's just been by far, as you probably would expect, which has basically been the case for the last 2 years now, or year and a half, he's been the more explosive and better running back compared to Tony Pollard. This past week, same exact thing, 59 carries, 6.6 yards per attempt, had a touchdown in this game, or 59 yards on 9 carries. Tony Pollard averages just 4 yards per carry. Believe it or not, that's one of his better games this season. Pollard saw more carries, but finally Spears was seeing more usage, barely played more of the snaps. We'll show you that in a second. And he just continues to bring explosive plays since his rookie year to this Tennessee offense, even to this past week. Check this out. Again, I don't want to get demonetized here, so let's just kind of pull this over a little bit here. And you can see he's going to take this one to the outside. If you watch the game, it was almost a crazy touchdown. He takes it to the outside. Let's just show you exactly where he accelerates upfield, something Tony Pollard just does not seem like he has in his bag at this point. Makes a couple of moves, gets down to what almost looks like a touchdown. He's kind of dropped right at the goal line, ultimately scores a touchdown later on in the game. And now that might not look like anything crazy. Oh, it looked like a big hole. Well, first of all, he got to the edge. He was able to beat guys with his speed, which is way better than Tony Pollard, and that's something we haven't seen Pollard do all year. Again, Pollard in this game, just 11 carries, 44 yards. And if you watch his carries, basically every single yard was extremely boring. He had a long run of 11 yards, or every single carry was boring. Long run of 11 yards. Outside of that, it was a bunch of 3 and 4 yard carries. In this game, Spears finally played more snaps, 51%, ran 42% of the routes, split the backfield carries 38% compared to 46% for Tony Pollard. Like we said, 11 for Pollard, 9 for Spears. And as you can see from JJ Zachariason, the late round quarterback here, he says this is Tyjae Spears, he's now outsnapped Tony Pollard in 2 out of their last 3 games. He's basically only been fully healthy for 2 to maybe 3 games at this point since coming back from injury. And there are some rumors, although I don't really trust Polymarket football, right? But there are some rumors that Tony Pollard could be on the trade block. Bears have some interest. I'm not really sure why the Bears would have interest, but maybe a team has interest. I would say probably the entire Tennessee Titans team, except for maybe Cam Ward, probably Jeffrey Simmons, who's banged up right now on defense. It seems like there's been other reports like the entire team is up for grabs. I don't know what you're going to get for Tony Pollard. Maybe you get a 6th round pick at this point. I doubt you get a 4th or a 5th round pick. Probably definitely not a 4th round pick. So we'll see what a team is willing to give for Tony Pollard at this stage in the game. And if Pollard was to get traded, or if they were to phase him out, or if Pollard was to get banged up, we saw at the end of last year, Tyjae Spears in 3 games as the workhorse back, averaged 20.7 fantasy points per game, top 5 running back during that time, on 44 receiving and 42 rushing yards, so 86 total yards per game when he's been healthy. And he's been banged up for a lot of his career. I get it, Tyjae Spears, but he's healthy right now. When he's been healthy, he's been one of the better per touch running backs in the NFL these last 3 years. Next man up, we've talked about this guy for like 2 straight, maybe 3 straight weeks since Tyreek Hill's injury. We brought him up again last week because Darren Waller also hit the IR, but Malik Washington, basically because outside of Jalen Waddle, there wasn't much left in this passing attack. So Malik Washington, who had been seeing some volume, that continued this past week. He caught 4 of 5 targets, 36 yards and a touchdown. During the buys, in your PPR formats, he got you 13.5 fantasy points. That's pretty dang good. And honestly, it's important to look at how the usage was because his role was expanded. As you could see, and as you would expect, Jalen Waddle led the team with 89% of the routes, 23% of the targets. Number 2, though, was Malik Washington. He ran 64% of the routes in this game. That was an increase from just a week before that when he was not even seeing 60% of the routes run. He ends up earning 19% of the targets. When you're comparing it to the other guys on this team, like Nick Westbrook, mostly a jump ball outside receiver, veteran Cedric Wilson at this stage, yes, it makes sense that Malik Washington, a younger player with a great college profile, his final year there is going to get more usage. Also a very fast player as well. Now this is a tweet from No Expert FF on Twitter. He says Malik Washington has 5+ targets now in 4 straight games, basically since Tyreek Hill went down. That's important to call out. Malik Washington, if you're not familiar, final year of college, 110 catches, 1,400 yards. He had some downfield usage, but a lot of it was these short passes in that Virginia offense. That's exactly the role he's playing right now in Washington. He's not being used downfield all that much. Short, quick passes from Tua, which is kind of, or I said the role in Washington, I meant the role in Miami. Short, quick passes from Tua, which is exactly what they want in the Tua offense with Mike McDaniel. Washington kind of fits it pretty well. So Washington is an ad in all 12 team formats. Now, if you want to see my #1 waiver wire ad at every single position completely free for this week, you can check it out right now, linked in the description below, or you can head to waiverwins.com. That takes you to this page. You just enter your email right here. Once you enter your email, I will then send you the #1 waiver ad at every single position for this week and every single week for the rest of the year as well. You'll get it in your inbox, I believe, every Tuesday. So you'll be set for every single week to win your waiver wire, ultimately get to the playoffs, win your league. If you don't see it in a couple of minutes after you enter your email at waiverwins.com, just check your spam or promotional folders. It'll be in there. All right, the next man we got to talk about is Tyler Algier. Now, if you look at this past week, right, you're going to look at the box score and you're going to go, 4 carries, 4 yards. Why do I want to add this guy? He actually did score a touchdown in the game, which we took him to score an anytime touchdown because the matchup was so good against Miami. It didn't end up panning out that way. We kind of got lucky at the end of the game. But look, I mean, even Bijan Robinson, 9 carries, 25 yards. When your quarterback's ruled out, and then Drake London's ruled out, basically like overnight, they say he's questionable, ruled out right before the game. Pretty easy for Miami to just say, yeah, let's stop Bijan and Algier, the only threats on this offense right now, when Kirk Cousins and Drake London or Kirk Cousins is playing and Drake London is out. But at the end of the day, Algier probably is, I would say, no doubt about it, a top 5 handcuff in fantasy, if not #1, because not only is this offense, for the most part this year when they're fully healthy, able to move the ball on the ground. They came into week 8 leading the NFL in rushing yards per game with over 125 per game. Algier himself has 4 touchdowns on the year, so he's like a flex play already for you during some of the bye weeks. And we know what he could do. In his 1 year as the clear workhorse starter, his rookie year before Bijan got there, set the Falcons record with over 1,000 rushing yards as a rookie. Between his rushing and receiving, had nearly 1,200 total yards. He ended that year from week 14 on as like a top 10 running back in fantasy, averaging over 100 yards per game. Algier, with workhorse usage, is a quality back, I believe, out of BYU. So he's worth stashing as a top handcuff. If we just saw 3 running back injuries this past week, if anything was to happen to Bijan, obviously Algier becomes the guy who is a top 12 running back every week, probably. Next up, let's talk about Kyle Monangai. We talked about him last week as a top ad because he went out there and he did this. He saw 13 carries. He turned that into 81 yards and a touchdown. He looked really good out there. He finally was threatening some of DeAndre Swift's workload 2 weeks after the bye week. Now, Swift did come into that game dealing with an injury. He was questionable in week 7. Same thing as he was heading into week 8. And in week 8, you see Swift see 11 carries. You see just 7 for Kyle Monangai in a game where the offense really didn't get going on the ground. 23 carries compared to 38 pass attempts for Caleb Williams in that game. Rome Odunze started to take off. You started to get a decent game out of DJ Moore, right? So the passing attack was kind of the way in this past week's game. But even though you only see 7 carries for 24 yards and it doesn't look as good as the week before, the underlying usage still looked good. Monangai actually saw a season high 45% of the snaps in this game. He actually ran more routes and saw more third down usage than DeAndre Swift. Again, DeAndre Swift came into this game once again questionable with a groin injury, so maybe it's because of that, but also Ben Johnson, the coach, just like he did in Detroit, wants to use multiple running backs, and that's what he's currently doing. If we look at the upcoming schedule, let's just assume like this somewhat close snap share continues. You're going to get Monangai seeing like 10 opportunities or more in most games. Look at the upcoming schedule. Matchup against the Bengals, amazing. Matchup against the Giants, amazing. Vikings is like a so-so matchup. They're some weeks hot, some weeks cold. The Steelers is a terrible defense right now. So 3 out of the next 4 weeks are good matchups for this Bears offense in general. Maybe they play with some leads, especially potentially against the Bengals, maybe even against the Giants in these next 2 weeks. That's where you could see Monangai being a flex option during the bye weeks for you. And if anything happens to Swift, obviously Monangai steps up even more. I also want to touch on Jalen Colker, who it seems like we're touching on every single week this season. Let's just look at it. This past week, you're going to look at the box score and say, who cares? 3 catches, 36 yards with Andy Dalton, who took 7 sacks in that game and looked terrible on just 4 targets for Jalen Colker. Who cares, Sal? This is pointless. I don't care about 6.6 fantasy points. That's barely flex worthy. It probably isn't flex worthy. I understand all that, but let's look at this right here. In terms of the usage, Jalen Colker ran 76% of the snaps or routes. Why is that important? The week before that, he was only running like 40% of the routes. He only played 37% of the snaps. His usage increased a ton this past week because he's finally getting healthy as he returns from, I believe, a high ankle sprain. And if you remember towards the end of the season last year, fantasy points, this is his rookie year as an undrafted free agent Jalen Colker. He flashed sometimes 10 points, 17 points, but towards the end of the year, 21 fantasy points, a top 12 wide receiver, finished the year with 14 fantasy points. He averaged 10 fantasy points per game over his final month. Again, this was an undrafted receiver with some bad bad quarterback play from Bryce Young for most of last season. Maybe now is the number 2 option in this offense. Tedero McMillan taking some of the attention away on defense. During the bye weeks, he could be a guy who can spike for some good performances as a talented wide receiver who's finally getting healthy. Just as a reminder, Jalen Coker, we've talked about this on this channel before, he ranked 5th amongst rookie pass catchers in yards per route run last season, only behind Brian Thomas, Ladd McConkey, Malik Neighbors, and Brock Bowers. That means he was ahead of some other very good and talented wide receivers who were rookies last year. Jalen Coker is a guy who has shown he could be legit. And when you look at his competition, obviously Tedero McMillan's the clear number 1. Xavier Legette, sure, he had a spike week recently, but for the most part, Coker should slide in as the number 2 option on a team that does want to run the ball, but when they fall behind in games, which will be often probably the rest of this season, especially with Andy Dalton, if he has to be the quarterback for another week or 2, depending on Bryce Young's status. Like this upcoming week, a matchup against the Packers is coming. They probably fall behind. Maybe the quarterback, whoever it is, has to throw 35 to 40 times. Maybe you get Coker getting 7 to 8 targets during your bye week, or while some players on your team are on bye. So be sure to consider adding Coker this week in your deeper leagues. At least stash them in your 12-team format. All right, so these are the 10 players that you should add in your fantasy leagues before week 8 begins and before your friends can. Now, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe button before you go. And tomorrow's video will show you the players you should trade for, the guys that I believe rest of season you want on your fantasy teams. That video will pop up right here once it's out. But until then, appreciate you all a ton, and I'll see you in the next one.